The one who came closer to Indian thinking is Maslow when he developed the theory of hierarchy of needs. So he says there is a hierarchy through which every human being has to go through. There is an underlying assumption that since this is a hierarchy, so you cannot bypass one layer and get to the third layer.
Okay.
So there he says basic needs, safety needs, esteem needs, self-realization, self-actualization. But is it the case with every individual in the society? We find often we come across so many people who do not really bother much about the first three layers and directly jump to fourth or fifth layer. Whether the Western model can accommodate those people? No, because they ask them to come through this route.
Okay.
Because we are here to take care of your roti kapda makan, so we'll give you, you become productive, and then you go through this pyramid and attain the self-actualization.
Namaste. Today we are gathered here to talk about a unique concept which is called cultural economy. Now, as we know in the current context, these sets of ideas and processes that we think of as economy are going under rapid change. And even in big corporates, the idea of a culture has started to emerge. Therefore, we know that culture is a very important component when it comes to discussing human relations, human performance within an organization. But then how does culture permeate society? How does culture inform economy? It is something that we're going to be talking about with Sri Vishnuji. Namaste Vishnuji.
Namaste,
Welcome
Rinkuji.
to Sangam Talks. Vishnuji is a part of the project of Dharmarajya, and he is going to be telling us about how cultural economy is a very important component in the functioning of any nation. So Vishnuji, tell us what is cultural economy to begin with?
Cultural economy is a thought, is an idea in which culture creates the economy, whereas the culture is predominant, economy is a byproduct of the culture. What we have today is, as we all know, that there are two predominant economic thoughts that have ruled the world for the last 300 years, be it capitalism, be it Marxism, or the mixed economy sorts. So all these ideas have their main focus on economy. Economy was at the center and culture was revolving around it. So to make the things very simpler, every metric, every aspect of human being is measured only in terms of monetary output or economic output it gives. So in that sense, cultural economy is not economic centric, but it is a byproduct of the culture.
But Vishnuji, when we talk about a nation, then we think about it in terms of development. And when we talk about development, economy is measured through GDP. So how does cultural economy reflect on that? Or does the cultural economy take into account all the factors that the contemporary and the popular economy measures?
Of course, it does take every aspect of the modern economy into account. But at the same time, how it differs from the present system is the way it approaches any of the factors of production or any aspect of the economy as such. Say, let me put it this way. What is the measure today we have to measure the progress of an economy or a country? It is again in terms of GDP. Then how do we measure the success of an artist? A.R. Rahman becomes uh, the greatest musician, not because for the kind of music he creates, but just because he is the highest paid music director in the country. Virat Kohli is the greatest cricketer, once again, for the endorsements he gets, not for the batting genius he is basically. I'm not saying he's not a great player, but the lens we approach, the lens we adopted to judge, to measure one's genius or whatever, creative genius, is again in terms of money.
Right.
So this way, we have centered every aspect of life around economy, which ultimately is not making us happy. So
Okay.
from this we have to progress towards, because every human being craves happiness. So if that is the ultimate goal of every human being, then whether this particular approach is making human being happy or not, we have to revisit and
But
progress
what is the
upon.
measure of happiness in a society, Vishnuji? Is it the amount of success that people derive out of their material achievements? Or happiness is not actually, it's a very abstract idea. It's not a measurable entity.
Exactly.
So how do you say that human beings are not happy in the present state?
Of course, because they themselves, because in the present model, let's put it, happiness differs from individual to individual. There is no one standard rule to make everyone happy. If we realize this, then the kind of theories we develop, the kind of policies we make, everything should align towards this understanding of human nature.
Right.
But unfortunately, the kind of models we have today, once again, be it Marxism or capitalism, which have in their origin the Christian anthropological beliefs, wherein a human being is described as an economic rational man, or human being is a bundle of desires. If you define a human being like that, and it makes your responsibility to make a human being happy as if it is the state's responsibility to make a human being happy. No one can make others happy, basically.
Isn't this what we've been trying to achieve? The state has been designing policies or programs to make human beings, its citizens, happier.
Exactly, that is precisely. But how can the state define what makes an individual happy? Because happiness differs from one individual to the other. So, for one, the monies may make him happy. For one, the artistic genius he provides may make him happy. So, in the present system, we do not account for all of this. We standardize and we tell that croti kapda makan will eventually make every person happy. So, everyone has to strive for it. And in the process, it is the responsibility of the government to take care of these three things. Instead, the state's responsibility is not to make the individual happy, to create an environment to enable him to make himself happy.
Okay.
State should not become an hindrance, but unfortunately today state taken up the responsibility of making an individual happy and creating a mess out of it.
So, do we have a comparison of the various states, for example, a welfare state or the state in India, which tells us that these are the markers that we are looking at when we define the aspect of cultural economy that you're talking about? And how does it make it relevant for our country?
Not just our country.
So, is it
There are certain statistics I can tell you.
right?
Wherein recently I came across a newspaper wherein it was stated that 98% of the Americans, one time or the other in their lifetime, visit a depression center. They undergo
Depression center.
depression treatment. Yeah.
All right.
So what is that? And at the same time, we all know that the moment that strikes, or whether it is economically or statistically right or not, America is treated to be a developed nation, the richest country in the world, at least, as on the basis of GDP or on the basis of per capita income. But is it a happy society then? So the data stares at you with a contradicting fact.
Okay.
So in that sense, creating a happy society enabling a happy society should be the goal of the state, not the richest or not the most prosperous. Are they in contradiction to each other? Not necessarily.
Right.
Because the data favors our case. Whereas it is historical fact known to all of us that for 1800 years, Bharat remained the number one country in the world. Economically, it's not spiritually or some other parameters.
Okay. Can you give us some data on this? How economically prosperous we were in that century?
Obviously, there is a project taken up by Angus Madison in early 2000s. And there is a ongoing project in his name after his demise, Angus Madison's project, in which he clearly stated, he elaborated all the economies from 1st century AD to 1820 AD.
All right.
And let me give you the statistic that if America today is treated as the number world economy, it has been so at least oddly for 35 years, since only after the collapse of the Soviet Russia. Before that, it was not unanimous choice. There was a fight between USSR and US. And if USSR at the helm of the affairs for say 70 years, from 1917 to 1987, it collapsed within 70 years. And you can't, even the UK at the helm of its peak of its empire lasted only for 100 years. If these are taken as models to be emulated, then think of this. There is one economy from 1st century AD to 1820 AD, almost for 1800 years, undisputed number one economic power in the world.
Okay.
1/3 of the world's produce is produced in India alone.
So, what we are looking at essentially now is the example that we've lived through, that we have presented to the world, and we are now looking at recreating such a model for our society.
Not exactly recreating a model, but take a cue from it.
Okay.
Because it is quite ironical that all these economies which are there only for 200 300 years, the civilizations which uh, went through the kinds atrocities like slavery and other things, if they became a model to be emulated, why not our economy? Why not our model, which almost proved to be the most flawless economy, or wealth was created, wealth was evenly distributed, and it lasted not for 1 or 2 years but 800 years. Then it makes a case this economy needs to be studied.
Right.
What today we do not have is, we do have economic models. India is still a functioning economy. We can't say we are completely capitalistic, we can't even say we are completely socialistic. Of course, it has been mixed. But irrespective of which model the state has adopted, the society is a functioning society. The society saw to it that the economy revives as and when it is necessary. So, this model needs a proper attention, not just from Indian side, from the world side.
But Vishnuji, haven't we seen a rise in economic growth in India in the past decade and a plus a few years? So how do we come to the conclusion that this economic model is not working? Because I clearly see India rising.
Simply because it has not worked elsewhere. It has not worked in the countries where it originated in. For example, let me put it this way. The economic models proposed by the West. So everyone today watches for free markets.
Precisely.
Are these really free? The state and government from time to time intervened. When there was Great Depression, during the times of 98 crisis, during the times of 2008 crisis, state is making an entry. For the sake of calling it, we are calling it free markets, but it hasn't been the case. First thing then. And actually, where do these economic models draw their inspirations from? So the difference between when we talk of cultural economy, we don't make theories, we don't make models in the air. Our models and our theories are properly rooted, because that is the nature of any theory building in according to Bharatiya traditions. So we make theories based on we have ontological basis. When we say something, this is how we view human being.
Yes.
As I mentioned a little while ago, the Western economic theorists make an assumption that a human being is a bundle of desires.
Right.
And what you have to do? You have to
Fulfill those.
fulfill those desires in order to make him happy.
Precisely.
But isn't it common sense that every desire of a human being can never be fulfilled? So how do we solve this complex problem?
But Vishnuji, aren't you looking at a person like an ascetic, somebody who gives up his desires? So how does the Indian model look? Does the Indian model also look at making ascetics out of regular people?
Yeah, this is where actually Indian model comes into picture, rightly, as you rightly asked. So the inspiration for the present models, the one who came closer to Indian thinking is Maslow, when he developed the theory of hierarchy of needs. So he says there is a hierarchy through which every human being has to go through. There is an underlying assumption that since this is a hierarchy, so you cannot bypass one layer and get to the third layer.
Okay.
So there he says basic needs, safety needs, esteem needs, self-realization, self-actualization. But is it the case with every individual in the society? We find often we come across so many people who do not really bother much about the first three layers and directly jump to fourth or fifth layer. Whether the Western model can accommodate those people? No, because they ask them to come through this route.
Okay.
Because we are here to take care of your roti kapda makan, so we'll give you, you become productive, and then you go through this pyramid and attain the self-actualization.
So does the Indian model give an individual the freedom to directly jump to the upper layers of the
It
monsters?
is for the individual. State has got nothing to do with it. State doesn't even compel you.
Okay.
If you want to live your life like this, okay. I don't want to measure your output in terms of productivity,
Okay.
because there are so many people who just exist and they pursue different goals. So in our model, we have provisions even for an artisan and ascetic.
Right.
Two extremes we can easily accommodate. Whereas economic models of the West try to bring everyone under one umbrella. There is a starting point and there is a ladder through which everyone has to go through. This makes things complicated.
So therefore, if our proposed model looks at Indian society because it is diverse and it accommodates this diversity, whereas the Western models are not accommodating diversity at all. They are looking at human beings as one solid whole who are
Exactly.
all alike, whose desires are alike, and whose innate pursuits are probably all
Whose
alike.
goal is alike, whose goal is one,
Okay.
who the means through which they have to
Reach.
reach their goal is also the same.
Okay.
So standardization of everything,
Okay. Okay.
and concept of standardizing, it can easily be 100 years back or 150 years back. We never had these ready-made shirts, one shirt fitting all. We used to have tailors wherein, because we believed that every human body is unique.
Right.
You have to get stitched according to how you look like. But today we have, I mean, just I'm
It's
telling
an
about the
example.
mindset that has been percolated to the lowest possible level.
All right.
At the highest level, the standardization assumption is there, and it gets percolated like this.
So whatever is produced at the highest level, in the sense that they are thinking of standardizing everything. So we have ready-made clothes for all sizes. So and one size would fit all kinds of bodies.
Exactly.
Is this what you're
It
saying?
is there in their philosophical and theological assumptions too.
Now please elaborate
One God
on
fits
this.
all.
Okay.
We have one God, He fits all. We
Okay.
have one practice, it has to fit all.
Right.
We can standardize everything that should fit everyone. It may have some economic advantages in the sense you may attain some economies of scale.
Scale, yes.
But at the same time, it kills the individual creativity or aspirations for being different.
So when we talk of cultural economy, we are taking into account all the individual aspirations also and their fulfillment as well.
Yes.
And it need not be monetized all the time.
Everything need not be monetized.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that we don't monetize anything.
At all.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have been the number one economy in the world.
Precisely.
So, but we give scope for every individual to fulfill his potential. The state's responsibility is very limited. Whereas the present models, be it again capitalism, for the sake of saying it, it says state's intervention is minimal. But the state's intervention is maximum in deciding the way humans should conduct himself.
That's true. That's why we have so many policies, so many laws
Exactly.
supporting an individual or maybe taking away his rights also.
True, very true.
So, what does our proposed model derive its inspiration or its ideals from? Where are we looking at as inspiration in the proposed cultural economy model?
Before building a model, we need to work on theory. What today in India we have a model, whether it is stated, whether it is, documented or not. But there is a model which is functioning against all odds, against the active suppression by the state, if I may say so.
Okay.
Because I'll give you an example, and then we'll get back to the models.
Right.
Okay. A little while ago, I was talking to Rahul and I was giving the same example. So, what actually present models did? So, we have two great recessions in the recent times, especially the 2008 crisis, economic crisis. It was an US-led economic crisis. Okay. It was a subprime crisis in US, and since it originated in the US dumped it onto the world. So, entire world had to take the brunt of that recession. Okay. And even some of the Western European economies, which have always sided with the US, started criticizing US because they also, on the one hand, US got sunk, and at the same time, US also took them along with. And only there were three economies which withstood this onslaught. One was Japan, one was Germany, one was Bharat. Okay. So how the two are different? These two have got like if I want to get into the details, these two are bank-led economies. Whereas US is a capital market-led economy, stock market-led economy. Banks saved to an extent. Okay. But in India, the model is completely different. In India, of course, we are perceived to be believed that, India is a bank-led economy, bank lending-led economy, which isn't the case. Most of the needs of the common man in India, the entrepreneurs will get their monies not from the banks, not from the capital markets. ये विश्वास होता है ना, वो भरोसा के ऊपर ले जाता है. Okay. So he gets his money for his day-to-day business and to run his day-to-day business from small lenders who do not fit into any of these economic models. Okay. So when we talk of a model, there is an existing model which is not properly studied. First of all, there are people like Gurmurthu ji, Kanka Sabhapati ji who have made huge, inroads in understanding these models. But today, what we lack is what makes these models work, the theory behind it. So our attempt in Dharmaraja and as a part of cultural economy
Hmm.
is confined only to build theory. Not confined, is aimed at building theory.
Right.
If possible, come up with explaining that models.
All right. You talked about Professor Vaidyanathan. Can you expand on his idea of the social capital that he talks about?
Oh yeah. For this we need to go back a little back into the history.
Sure.
Both of the Western as well as the Bharatiya.
Yes.
So every economy addresses the problems that are there in a different manner. So the biggest problem all through the years that was supposed to be addressed at the first is manpower. How did the West address its manpower problem? How are we addressing our manpower problem? So West had this evolution in its manpower model, in the sense, in the ancient Rome there were slaves. So the only way they could understand or they could get the man to produce something is to put them to slavery.
Right. By
So
coercion, by forcing.
Coercion, by force, you deprive them of all their rights, all their individual existence, and
Then make
with
them
fear.
productive.
Exactly. Then only they can be productive.
Right.
But this model doesn't last long because human beings cannot be put to such severe circumstances for long. It happened. So then they graduated to serfdom. So wherein the slaves were given a piece of land but was not given the right to cultivate their land before they cultivate the land of the landlord. Aisa serfdom kuch saal chala. So from slave to serf, then to peasant. Now there is a landlord, there is a peasant, you have your own land, you can cultivate. Even this was not sufficient because it was also exploited. Then there were colonies for the British, fortunately, British, Dutch, and France. So they have colonies and they got new slaves. And again, from once colonial mindset is established, then it graduated to present day capitalism where they found employee. So this process is gradual. It is a kind of evolution for the West. Say from slave to serf to peasant to present day employee. This is how they addressed manpower. You asked me about social capital. The same manpower problem which West failed to address is turned out to be a very asset. And what we formed out of this manpower is a social capital.
Okay.
We built our social order in such a manner that every human being, by very birth, he can never be unemployed because he will take up his occupational job. Kulavritti will be there. So he will be inducted right from the beginning there. And as he progresses, as he gains experience, he will become a master of that. Thus, he fulfills his own ambitions. At the same time, he was contributing towards the society.
And he's also training people of his own kul under him, and they're working under him as apprentices and learning the same trade as well.
Perfect. And one more thing, what present day systems fail to address. Today, there is a big problem as far as for the companies to transfer the knowledge from one employee to the other.
Okay.
Because one employee quits, because the companies treat employee as their slaves or whatever. They don't expect them to be loyal, right? Even employee has no incentive to be loyal because they fire as and when the company runs into losses. So the relationship between the employee and the employer is contractual. But there is no mechanism where the employee who has learned most of the things from the company, how does he transfer it to the next employee? He doesn't have an incentive, he simply quits and goes.
Right.
Whereas in the ancient, our old system, it's kulavritti, and the father, usually he picks the job from the father.
Can you take an example and then explain it, Vishnuji, of the kulavritti? Any trade?
Pottery, blacksmith, goldsmith, or sculpturing, whatever.
Yeah.
And most of these kulavrittis are picked up from the father. And father as a teacher has an incentive, two-side incentive. One is his art is being promulgated, his art is being promoted, and the other is his own son is carrying his legacy. So every father will have this incentive of passing on his legacy to the son. So thus we could form social skill genius as well as it formed social capital. So this is how we address both the shots at one go. Capital formation as well as the manpower problem.
But now that the jatis have disintegrated, all these skills have also disintegrated and disappeared from our society. Now, how do you propose that a cultural economy model rejuvenate these systems and make social capital relevant again? Or is it, do you even see it being relevant in today's scenario?
it remains relevant for all times. Social capital relevant. It remains relevant because it is of permanent in nature. Okay, whether are we trying to go back and bring them back? No, it is not possible. Let's be honest about it. But what can be done? State taking this fact into cognizance and then making policies according to it. It's not that like rejuvenating the old practices because we have technology is so advanced, we may not even to be able to replicate what it was. But those can be the guiding lines for your future policy making.
Okay.
When you come up with a model, can you take these factors into consideration where an individual has an incentive to pass on his knowledge, where an individual can come together with other people and form a capital sort thing, like social capital as it exists today. So if policy making takes these things into consideration, that will be fine. And we are working in this direction.
All right. So are you proposing a universal model or a theory for this kind of a task? Or is it going to be confined only to Bharat?
Is this universal in nature? Yes, it is. Why do we say so? Because what the model we are experiencing today in our country is Western model, and it has not collapsed not just in the West but also in the Bharat.
Can I quickly insert one question here, Vishnuji? We at least have had a history of jatis and kulavrittis in our country, but not necessarily the European countries. It was not very structured there, though the guilds and clans existed there as well. But it was not so structured in their countries. So therefore my question about its universality.
So the universality is not with respect to the models as such.
Okay.
The universality is about the theory.
So what we are proposing is a universal theory on which various models can be worked out.
Keeping their
country,
their demands in view, their
in mind.
Logistics in view.
Perfect. Okay. More explanation on this.
Oh, you want more explanation on this?
Yes.
Okay, let me put it this way.
Okay. How the model is universal, that is.
Yeah, because this model becomes universal in theory because in every economic model has to first, every economic theory first has to explain how it views a human being.
Okay.
So today the problem with West, as I said before, they define a human being as a rational economic man whose life goal is centered around economic activity. And they also attach one more adjective to him, saying that a human being is a bundle of desires. Now, what makes him happy? And they also make a claim. Every human being seeks to be happy.
Okay.
If this is a stated objective of the human being, he seeks to be happy, and happiness comes only by fulfilling the desires and fulfilling all the desires. All the desires can never be fulfilled. Therefore, a human being can never be happy. Is this a way to formulate a problem? Now, how our traditions formulate the problem? We also make some statements, we also make some claims, but look at the wordings. Each individual can be happy. This is what we say.
Okay.
So, from seeking to be happy to can be happy. So, in order to be happy, he doesn't need to fulfill any desire, because when we write a theory, even the much maligned Manusmriti, before getting into the procedural or operational aspects of the text, it first starts with defining how the creation has happened.
Right.
And then comes down how human beings behave. It is not that how human beings should behave. ऐसा नहीं बोलता है.
It is just describing the condition of the society as it is. It is presenting to us.
Exactly. How it is, how people are, and what is the nature of a human being, what is the nature of happiness, the gradation of happiness. We have Anandamaya Kosha, Anandas of Devata, Anandas of Brahma, Ananda of Manushya, everything. Everything is there. Then it also deeply dissects into the nature of desire.
Okay.
So it simply says, I know everything about your desire. Kamo ve sankalpa mulaha. So at your root you have sankalpa. So Manusmriti, just imagine a text like Manusmriti, if it does so. And most of the texts go deeper into all these aspects. What is happiness, what is desire, what is a want. So once it is properly defined, the corresponding theory that emerges out of this understanding of the nature will obviously be universal, because it is the same everywhere. Nature of human being remains, intrinsic nature remains the same.
everywhere.
Maybe manifestation may get different.
And therefore, we propose that this is a universal model.
Obviously, the theory is universal.
The theory is universal. Sorry, the models are going
Models
to be
can be
adapted on the basis of the theory. But then, how does one test the efficacy of such a model, Vishnuji? We know that this model worked in our country with this theory because it is derived from our own principles. But how does the West feel? How would the West look at such a theory?
For that, again, you need to do the historical
Analysis.
historical analysis.
Okay.
Whether the models developed by the West were they
Successful.
useful? Were they useful at least in achieving
First
their
useful.
own purpose, stated purposes?
Okay.
Could they do that?
Right.
So we have the history stares at us. Okay, because they moved from one to other, discarded the previous, adopted the new one. Okay, which is fair enough. From their evolution point of view, which is fair. But if you have to do a proper comparison, you should not compare apples with oranges. If you want to compare, then compare the times of Europe in medieval Europe with the medieval Bharat.
Right.
Then results are there for everyone to see.
Okay. So this is a very new idea that you are proposing, cultural economy, which existed in our country, of course, but then we are proposing that we adopt such a model again. Is there a way to test it like a pilot project?
Can we test it as a pilot project? There are, even you need not test. If you understand it, the testing is done basically, in my view.
Okay.
For example, the very fact that we could withstand the two deadliest recessions in the recent past, in spite of the state's active oppression of the model, it is still surviving. That tells you that here in this country, the mechanism is completely different. They are not devoid of their cultural practices. And so with this we can tell. This is a tested model only.
And we can adopt it.
We can adopt it everywhere. Only thing is that what we need to do is theorize it first.
Right.
Once it is, why should we theorize? Why can't we let it happen? Why can't we
as
let
it is?
As it is? The only problem is if it is not theorized. In the coming future, it may so happen that the Western dominant models will be imposed forcefully on us. And the society has to adopt it, embrace it. So with a stated theory, it becomes easier for state to take cognizance of the theory and make policies according to it.
And our aim is to evolve the best possible theory to evolve the best possible model for our country and our society.
Exactly.
So what problems do you see in the Indian model, Vishnuji, that you are proposing such a model or a theory for cultural economy?
The existing model as it stands doesn't enable a person to fulfill his potential. It intrudes into an individual. It forces an individual to adopt what state thinks right. It deprives an individual of his liberty, whatever his freedom to choose. So, are we proposing a model? We are not yet in a position to propose a model. But what better things can be done keeping this in? State has to withdraw from interfering too much into business activities and individual's life and become a dharmic state. Because as it stands today, there are no checks and balances for state to collide with the powerful business people and make policies.
So, can you elaborate this a bit?
Yeah, this is what actually capitalism did to most of the countries. So even today, it is a well-known fact that few business houses run the world economy. We all know that, right?
Yes.
I mean, just a few handful of people. So how did it happen? Because there were no checks and balances. State exists and business people exist. And once there is a collision between these two, then the rest will be exploited. How does a Dharma Raja or how does a cultural economy prevent this? Because the roles of a Raja, the roles of a Vaishya, and what they have to pursue for their own benefit, all these things are clearly stated. The duty of the Raja is to protect all the three sections. Whereas Vaishya is supposed to create the wealth. So wealth generation is the duty of the Vaishya. Raja is supposed to protect it. And if at all these two come close, in order to exploit the other, there is a Brahmana who puts checks and balances on the Raja. And Shudra, which actually in the which is a production class, may not co-opt with the Vaishya. So checks and balances have properly been laid, and moreover, it is clearly stated that Dharmasya Moolam Artha. So Artha, you go after Artha only to pursue Dharma. It is not beyond Dharma. So once it is stated clear, so the people who generate wealth will also have the responsibility of seeing to it that it is evenly distributed, or with the kind of wealth they amass, others are not exploited because it is against dharma.
Okay.
So with these principles, a cultural economy obviously puts checks and balances, whereas in the modern system we do not have.
Okay.
So that is the reason why the distance, the gap between the poorer and richer is getting wider and wider every day.
And therefore, we need a new kind of theorizing for a better state
Exactly.
and for a better human being's life.
Obviously. There needs to be a theory. Whether it is new or old, we don't know. Maybe
Okay.
we may end up provide.
Because we are certainly deriving our ideas from our old texts.
Exactly.
Those principles are being derived from our own texts.
What we really do not have today is a theory for the existing model. Whatever model, whichever way it is functioning,
We
do
don't
not have a
the-
theory for it.
Okay.
So once theory is developed, models can also be developed accordingly. I'll give a few examples. I'm not after West. I'm not going after West. My intention is not to give a critique
Malign
on
the West or anything like that.
But
yes.
the kind of models the West has adopted definitely landed them in a more miserable state than they expected, than they intended for. Every aspect of the revolution has happened like that only. So, and one good thing that happened during the Enlightenment period of the West, one good thing happened for them is that they found new colonies. So our models went extinct. Our models were no more in operation only because we became a colony to
Under the
Europe.
British, yes.
Dutch, British, France.
Many people, yes.
So West benefited out of this colonization, whereas we completely lost everything of ours.
Okay.
And even some historians say today that the kind of achievements or prosperity the West could experience in the last 300 years is only because of Bharat. Otherwise, of course, there is an enlightenment phase, there was a scientific revolution phase, there was industrialization phase in the West. Industrialization happened from 1760 when the looms were invented, power looms were invented, and all these things. Steam engine was invented. Everything is fair, but European historians say everything would have gone into waste had British not found India as a colony, because the capital needed for such industrialization to survive was separate from Bharat. So today everything out of Bharat has been squeezed. So we have to at least make people aware of the fact that okay, this is how we stood once. There is an economic model of ours
Which
was
exists.
successful, which
Yes.
was successful,
Yes.
and then we can carry on the legacy, continue the legacy.
Thank you so much for being with us, Vishnuji, and giving us such a novel idea. I hope your work progresses very well,
Thank you.
and we have a great theory and model coming out of it.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
a lot.
Namaste.
Dhanyawad.